In my last video covering the Goblet of Fire and all the differences between the book and movie, you might recall me mentioning Hagrid's giant secret. Well, while the movie might have removed this secret conversation between Madame Maxime and Hagrid, in which our beloved gamekeeper revealed his darkest secret, they included the aftermath of this scandal, in which Rita Skeeter wrote a scathing article outing Hagrid as a half-giant and causing him to spiral so bad that he locked himself in his hut and quit Hogwarts. Wait, never mind, they didn't include that either. In fact, they didn't include anything from chapters 24 and 25 of the book other than Moaning Myrtle spying on an underage wizard in the prefect's bathroom. So join me today as I go over these hidden chapters and reveal every detail the movie missed regarding Hagrid's scandal, Rita Skeeter's insider knowledge, and Barty Crouch's sudden disappearance. My name is Gibby, and welcome back to episode 53 of Movies vs. Manuscripts, Harry Potter edition. Thanks for tuning in to Factor Fantasy Harry Potter, a channel dedicated to all things relating to the wizarding world. Before we get started, I wanted to shout out this commenter from the last episode. If you'd like to be featured next, be sure to drop your thoughts below. Also, if you enjoy nerdy breakdowns of the movies and books, like and subscribe for more, and perhaps even share this with a Harry Potter loving friend. Just a quick note of housekeeping, by the way, for my regular viewers, I have officially split the Factor Fantasy brand into two. The main channel will be dedicated to Tolkien, just like it originally started years ago, and the new channel, which you can see below as a collaborator on this video, will host all Wizarding World content. So if you're here just for Harry Potter, be sure to subscribe to that new channel, as in a couple of months I'll no longer be posting Harry Potter content on the main Factor Fantasy channel. Anyway, moving on with the episode, per usual, I'll cover all the changes across the main four categories of characters, timeline, location, and plot. Full transparency, today will be a little different since the movie just doesn't have any corresponding scenes for these chapters, but I'll get to that later. First, let's recap what the movie does show, that way it's fresh on our minds for the analysis. Picking up with where we left off last week, with Cedric giving Harry the tip about taking a bath with the egg, the movie hard cuts to Harry doing just that. At first, he doesn't have much luck, but after Moaning Myrtle appears and creeps on him, he finally figures out that he has to stick the egg under the water. Then, after listening to the clue, he sits there and figures out part of it. And then the movie hard cuts to the library, but we aren't going to get into that today. For now, we're just focusing on chapters 24 and 25. And with that being said, let's dive into things by starting with our first three categories of characters, timeline, and location. Now, since I don't have actual scenes to really compare these two, I'm gonna just name off the general people who don't get included anywhere in the movie, really. And those people would be Professor Grubbly-Plank, Ludo Bagman, Bertha Jorkins, Aberforth, Peeves, and Freed-Wulfa. As we'll see, Professor Grubbly-Plank is Hagrid's temporary replacement while he is hiding in his hut. Ludo Bagman is the head of magical games and sports at the Ministry. Bertha Jorkins is a woman who ventured into Albania and was captured by Wormtail. Voldemort then interrogated her and got crucial information from her that aids in his master plan to return, and then he killed her using her murder to create his final Horcrux, Nagini. Then moving on, we have Aberforth, who is obviously Dumbledore's brother, and it's the first mention that we get of him. A quite funny one, I might add, as Dumbledore jokes about Aberforth not being able to read. And finally, Peeves is the poltergeist we all know and love from Hogwarts, and Freed-Wulfa is Hagrid's giantess mother. Anyway, moving on to timeline, we don't have much to discuss other than the fact that the movie cuts out several weeks of content. Specifically, they cut out everything from Christmas until about a week into the second term of school. And lastly, the only location I think worth mentioning as an omission is the Three Broomsticks, as the book discusses a Hogsmeade trip that the trio took in these chapters, but the movie doesn't show any of that. Now, before I move into our final category of changes, I wanted to give a huge shout out to Jason, Joshua, Timothy, RoboSteve, and the rest of my incredible YouTube and Patreon members who help make these videos possible each month. I would give a special shout out to my newest member, but their YouTube profile literally doesn't have a username, so I'll just refer to them as anonymous for now. You know who you are, and I thank you. Also, I am almost done with the first full-cast immersive audiobook that Audible just released, and I've gotta say, I'm really impressed. I could do without the excessive Draco laughing, if you know you know, but other than that, it's super good and I feel like I'm reliving the story in a whole new way. As always, I have a link below which gets you your first month of Audible for free, and I'd encourage you to sign up if only to get the new audiobook for free. It's full cast and fully immersive with music, sound effects, and more, and they're releasing a new one each month, so the whole Harry Potter series will be out in just a few months. Anyway, I'm not trying to make this a sales pitch or anything, because the link gets you your first month free, and then you can cancel after that if you want. I just really like the audiobooks, and I think you would too. Now with that being said, let's dive into the plot changes, which as I mentioned earlier, is going to be more of a chapter-by-chapter summary. And in order to make this a more organized description of the events the movie didn't include, I'm going to break it down into 6 main parts, which span both chapters 24 and 25. First up in that list of 6 parts is the introduction, which in typical rolling writing style includes Harry's inner dialogue and a quick recap of the time since the Yule Ball. This is where we learn about several details, large and small, that round out the narrative as a whole. First, Harry learns from Hermione, whose hair is back to being bushy, that she used liberal amounts of Sleek Easy's hair potion for the Yule Ball, but she tells Harry that it isn't worth the effort to use that potion every day. Harry also notes that Ron and Hermione had gone back to being friendly with one another, but perhaps in an oddly formal tone. On top of this, Harry and Ron fill Hermione in on the conversation between Madame Maxime and Hagrid that they overheard the night before. Hermione isn't surprised, as she tells them that she assumed Hagrid was a half-giant, and she didn't seem to see a problem with it, although Ron was adamant that it's not good. Soon, the days began to roll by, and everyone realized that they needed to get to their holiday homework, which they had neglected over the Christmas break. And Harry, who had the second task looming in the distance, tried to figure out his egg every time he went into his dorm room. He yelled at it, asked it questions, and even threw it across the room at one point, but he still couldn't figure it out. Remember, he had received a hint from Cedric at the end of the Yule Ball, but Harry was very reluctant to take Cedric's advice. For starters, Harry was a little bitter that Cedric couldn't just be straightforward with him and tell him the answer to the egg. And in addition to that, Harry really disliked Cedric at the moment for continuing to go out with Cho. But eventually, Harry will break down and give Cedric's clue about the bath a try. However, that doesn't come until the next chapter. So what is this chapter all about? Well, as you can see from the title of the chapter, this is when we learn about Rita Skeeter's scoop. But what is it? Well, that brings us to our second section of this analysis, which is all about this giant scandal. We read that the first day of the new term was quickly upon them, and they had Care of Magical Creatures class with the Slytherins down at Hagrid's hut. But when they showed up, there was no Hagrid there. There was just an old lady who introduced herself as Professor Grubblyplank. It actually turned out that this was their best class yet, as their new professor showed them a unicorn, which is extremely rare to see in person. But Harry wasn't impressed. Instead, he was concerned about his friend and pressed Grubblyplank on the whereabouts of Hagrid. She refused to give him any information though, and simply said that Hagrid was currently indisposed. It wasn't until later on that Harry got his answer from Draco Malfoy, who was more than eager to show him the new Daily Prophet article by Rita Skeeter. Titled Dumbledore's Giant Mistake, Rita wrote all about how Hagrid is a half-giant and is endangering the students of Hogwarts. The article said that Hagrid had a twisted nature and loved to terrorize the students, which is why he took on the position of Care of Magical Creatures professor, and made his students take care of animals that hurt them. Draco Malfoy gave a quote saying that a hippogriff maimed him, and a flobberworm bit Crabbe. Plus, Draco added on that no one likes Hagrid, which is completely false, as only the Slytherins seem to have a problem with him. Then, after class, Parvati Patil mentioned that she enjoyed it and hopes Grubblyplank stays. But Harry is livid at this. He gets even more upset when Hermione also shares Parvati's view of the class, and he shoves the article in her face. Hermione is then also upset after reading the article, and the trio try to think of how in the world Rita Skeeter could have found out about this secret, as Hagrid has only told Madame Maxime by the looks of it. Of course, if you've read the books, then you know what ends up happening, and that Rita has a secret and illegal way of finding out information, but I'll save that for a future episode. The trio then decide to go to Hagrid, and later that day they head down to his hut, but he doesn't answer them at all. And on that note, we can head into section 3 of today's analysis, which is all about the trio's trip to Hogsmeade and their time in the Three Broomsticks. You see, after having no luck with Hagrid, the trio continued with their classes, and Professor Grubblyplank continued with teaching. It seemed like Harry would never see his friend Hagrid again, and on top of that, Harry was so annoyed and fed up with this whole egg business. Hermione kept bugging him to work on it, so he simply lied to her and said that he had almost cracked it. Eventually, the opportunity to go to Hogsmeade came up, and the trio took advantage of it. In Harry's mind, he thought maybe they'd run into Hagrid and be able to persuade him to come back to Hogwarts. On the way to Hogsmeade, they walked past the lake and spotted Victor Crumb doing swan dives into the lake from the Durmstrang boat. Harry and Ron both thought he was mad, but Ron was hopeful that the squid might do him in. Eventually, they got to the Three Broomsticks, and the first person they saw wasn't Hagrid, but Ludo Bagman. At this point in the story, we're starting to get an icky feeling for Bagman, and this moment seems to continue that thread as Harry spots him talking to some unpleasant-looking goblins. They seem to want something from him, and Ludo conveniently uses Harry as an excuse to leave them. He comes over to Harry and asks for a private word, away from Hermione and Ron. Then they discuss a few key things. First, Barty Crouch comes up, and Harry learns that Barty isn't just busy at the Ministry, as Percy had said at the Yule Ball, but he's actually sick and hasn't been in his office for weeks. He's simply been writing owls to Percy, who is taking care of all of his business. This is a crucial point to the Barty Crouch subplot, as we later learn of Barty Sr.'s demise, but the movie removed almost the entirety of this narrative. Additionally, Ludo and Harry discuss Bertha Jorkins, and Ludo says that he has people looking for her, and it's most odd for her to be missing this long. Of course, as I mentioned in the character section, Bertha is long dead and was used by Voldemort to collect vital information. Then, after getting those topics out of the way, Ludo brings up what he really wanted to discuss with Harry, and that is the tournament. He congratulates Harry once again for his work with the dragon, and then again offers Harry some under-the-table assistance, as technically it's illegal for him to offer aid to a Triwizard champion. Harry is put off by this, as he feels like there's an underlying motive. He also sticks up for Cedric, even though he doesn't want to, and asks Ludo if he's offered Cedric any help. Ludo sheepishly says no, and is slightly offended at Harry denying his offer for a second time. Thankfully for Harry, the Weasley twins show up in the pub and scare Ludo off. This is also a recurring theme, as Ludo seems to not want to talk to the twins, which we'll learn about that in a later chapter. But this isn't it for our section right here in the Three Broomsticks, as this trip wraps up with none other than Rita Skeeter walking through the doors. They overhear her talking about Ludo Bagman, who has just walked out, and Hermione is outraged by this woman's ability to turn anyone's life into a horrible story for her own gain. Harry loudly asks Rita if she's trying to ruin someone else's life, and Rita jumps all over this opportunity to ask Harry some questions. Of course, Harry refuses to give an interview, and Hermione calls Rita out for being a horrible woman. Although Hermione doesn't avenge Hagrid right here, later in the book, Hermione is the one who busts Rita for her illegal activity, which is one of the most satisfying parts of the book. Anyway, this takes us into our fourth section of today's analysis, as after leaving the Three Broomsticks, the trio head back to Hagrid's hut, more determined than ever to get him to answer the door. They bang on it and yell through the door, and are shocked when Dumbledore is the one who answers. As it turns out, Dumbledore had been there himself to try to comfort Hagrid. And when that didn't work, Dumbledore demanded Hagrid get back to work the next week and refused his resignation. The trio comforted Hagrid by telling him how horrible Rita Skeeter is and how they don't care if he's a half-giant. And eventually, Hagrid opened up and spoke to them, and compared himself to Harry with no mom or dad. Then he looked at Harry seriously and told him to win the Triwizard Tournament, on behalf of the outcasts and those in the Wizarding Society who are looked down upon. And after Hagrid asked how he was getting on with the egg, Harry couldn't bring himself to tell Hagrid that he's made no progress. So once again, he lied and said he's really close to figuring it out. And that is when he decided that enough was enough and he might as well give Cedric's hint a try. Which brings us to our second to last section of today's video, which is actually the only part of these chapters that has a corresponding scene, and that is Harry's time in the prefect's bathroom. I actually won't go into detail with this, but I will mention a couple of things the movie left out. Harry went to the bathroom late at night and therefore took the invisibility cloak with him, but he also took the Marauder's map. That way he could see if Filch or anyone else would be lurking about. On top of this, I've got to say that the prefect's bathroom in the book sounds a lot cooler. It even has a diving board, and the magical water and soaps that they get for a bath are pretty cool. And believe it or not, Moaning Myrtle in the book is just as creepy as in the movie. So that's actually accurate. What's not accurate is the aftermath of this bath, once Harry is heading back to the dorms. And that brings us to the sixth and final section of today's analysis. You see, all that Hagrid stuff wrapped up chapter 24, and chapter 25 is called The Egg and the Eye. As you can guess, half of it is dedicated to Harry and the bath, in which he figures out the egg's clue. But what does the eye mean? Well, we read that as Harry was about to leave the prefect's bathroom, he checked the Marauder's map to see if the coast was clear, and this is when he saw something very interesting: a name in Snape's office. but not just any name, the name of Bartemius Crouch. But how is that possible? After all, Harry had just learned from Ludo Bagman that Crouch was not feeling well and was at home. Harry hesitated, thinking if he should ignore it and go back to his dorms, but his curiosity got the better of him and he turned around to go snoop on Snape's office. Well, while Harry was on his way, he was going down a staircase and his leg fell right through a trick step which usually got Neville as a victim. Harry wobbled and the golden egg, still wet from the bath, slipped out of his arms, banging loudly down the stairs. All Harry could do was stay put as he was firmly stuck in the trick stair. Thankfully, he was under the invisibility cloak, but he'd lost the egg and the map, which also fell from his hands. And since the Marauder's map was now out of reach, he couldn't wipe it clean. Almost immediately, the voice of Filch rang down the hall and he was soon upon Invisible Harry. Having found the egg, Filch was convinced that Peeves had stolen it from one of the champions and had yet to see the map. Harry thought he might be in the clear until Snape appeared. Snape was livid, but for a different reason. He had passed his office and found the torches lit and his cupboard door ajar. Thankfully for Harry, Snape demands that Filch come with him to search for the intruder. But Filch is reluctant as he really wants to nail Peeves for this crime. In this moment of hesitation, Moody appears and asks what's going on. Before Snape can stop him, Filch tells Moody everything, and Moody notices Harry on the ground with his magical eye. Snape tells Moody that it's not important and is obviously suspicious of this new professor, seeming to think that he could have been the intruder in his office. After some back and forth, Snape goes to leave, but before he can, Moody points out the parchment on the ground, thinking that it's Snape's. Harry wildly motions from under the cloak so that Moody can see that the parchment is his, and Moody quickly uses Accio to snatch it up before Snape can get to it. Unfortunately, Snape had seen what it was, and putting two and two together, he immediately knew that Potter was involved. After all, what are the odds that the egg and the map would be in the same place? So Snape obviously assumed that Harry had been in his office to steal potion supplies again. And since the trio had already done this a couple of years prior, it's a fair guess. Thankfully, Moody covered for Harry, and after getting Snape to leave, he and Harry spoke. Harry told him about how he saw Barty Crouch on the map, and this seemed to freak Moody out, and rightly so, as we know that this isn't the real Mad-Eye Moody at all, and the map can see through this deception. With some quick thinking though, Moody makes up some tale about how Barty Crouch is one of the fiercest dark wizard hunters, and makes Harry overthink everything that he knows about Crouch and Snape. Then Moody asks to borrow the map, and Harry, in a position where he can't really say no, agrees to let the professor have it. And that is where the chapter ends. As you can see, these two chapters are a massive portion of the story, and frankly, it's kind of crazy that they got removed. I know, they can't fit everything in the movie because of time constraints, but all this subplot about Barty Crouch Sr. is kind of essential to the plot. I understood the movie when I first saw it because I had read the book first, but if I hadn't read the book, I'd probably see a lot of plot holes. What about you? Did you only watch the movie? And if so, did you understand what was happening, or would you have liked this extra information that the book includes? Remember, we're not done with this yet, so come back for each episode to learn more about what the movie changed about the original story. Also, just a reminder to subscribe to the new Harry Potter channel, which you'll see as a collaborator on this video. In the next couple of months, all Harry Potter episodes and lore videos will be hosted there. Have a great week, and I'll see you in the next video.